You ever notice how strange it feels when someone says, "I'm not on social media," and there's this tiny pause afterward? Not because you didn't hear them, but because your brain is scrambling to place them. No Instagram, no stories, no posts to scroll through at 2 a.m. when you're bored and mildly existential? Maybe you're that person. Or maybe you're the one secretly thinking, wait, how do you exist then? In a world where people announce lunch, heartbreak, workouts, and spiritual awakenings to the same audience, choosing not to be online can feel almost suspicious, as if opting out is some kind of personality statement, a rebellion, or worse, a red flag. But here's the thing most people miss. Avoiding social media isn't one single trait. It's not just anti-tech or old-fashioned or too serious. There are very different psychological reasons why some people quietly step away or never step in at all. And once you see them, you start noticing these people everywhere, at work, in friend groups, maybe in the mirror. So let's talk about the psychology of people who avoid social media and what it might be saying about how they see the world, relationships, attention, and themselves. And fair warning, one of these types tends to recognize themselves a little too clearly. There's a certain type of person who still owns a smartphone, still uses the internet, still Googles random questions at midnight, but somehow never posts. They'll watch, they'll read, they'll scroll just enough to stay informed, but when it comes to sharing, silence. Picture this. They take a photo. It's a good photo. Nice lighting, a genuine moment. They look at it for a second, then put the phone down. No caption, no upload, no urge to explain themselves to anyone. Psychologically, this often comes from a heightened awareness of being perceived. These people don't just think, "Do I like this photo?" They think, "How will this land? Who will see it? What assumptions will they make? What version of me does this create?" Their minds run simulations automatically, and the cost of being misunderstood feels heavier than the reward of being seen. This doesn't mean they're insecure in the obvious way. In fact, many of them are deeply self-aware, sometimes too self-aware. They understand that once something is posted, it stops belonging only to them. It becomes an object, a signal, a story others get to rewrite. So they opt out. Not because they have nothing to say, but because saying it publicly feels like giving up control. Maybe that's you. You don't hate attention. You just prefer attention that feels earned, contextual, human, not broadcast. Then there's another kind of social media avoider, and this one surprises people. They're not shy, they're not private, they're not anxious about being judged. They're tired. These are the people who once participated fully. They posted, they engaged, they commented, they kept up. And then, gradually, something shifted. Scrolling stopped feeling neutral and started feeling draining, like emotional static. They noticed subtle changes in their mood, comparison creeping in where it didn't used to live, a low-grade pressure to perform happiness, a strange sense of being behind in a race they never agreed to run. Psychologically, this type is highly sensitive to social environments, not in a fragile way, in a perceptive way. They pick up on social currents quickly, and social media is one giant emotional weather system. Outrage, joy, envy, grief, irony, urgency, all stacked on top of each other. For these people, logging off isn't dramatic, it's regulatory, like leaving a loud room to hear your own thoughts again. They don't necessarily judge others for staying online. They just know their nervous system doesn't thrive there. And once they feel the difference, calmer focus, fewer background comparisons, more presence, it's hard to go back. If this is you, you might notice something odd. Your life didn't get smaller without social media. It got quieter. And in that quiet, you started noticing what actually mattered to you, not what was trending.
Now, here's a type that often gets misunderstood. This person avoids social media not because they're overwhelmed, but because they're selective. They have a strong internal compass. They don't like shaping themselves in response to an audience they didn't choose. Imagine someone who's deeply values-driven. They know what they like, what they believe, how they live, and they've learned, sometimes the hard way, that constant exposure to others' opinions subtly erodes that clarity. Social media, for them, feels like standing in a room where everyone is talking at once, and eventually you start borrowing voices without realizing. Psychologically, these people prioritize internal authority over external validation. They don't want their sense of self constantly calibrated by likes, reactions, or algorithms. Not because they think they're above it, but because they know how persuasive it is. So, they step back, they limit exposure, they keep their inner life protected. This type often gets labeled as detached or aloof, but in reality, they're often deeply intentional. They choose influence carefully. They don't want to feel subtly nudged into caring about things just because everyone else does. If you resonate with this, you might notice you form opinions slowly, and once formed, they're solid. You'd rather have fewer inputs and clearer thinking than endless stimulation and blurred priorities. Then there's the quietest type of all. This person doesn't avoid social media out of principle, fatigue, or sensitivity. They simply don't need it. Their social world is anchored elsewhere, in long conversations, in one-on-one bonds, in routines that don't require documentation. They experience life directly, not as potential content. Psychologically, these individuals often have a strong sense of enough connection, enough stimulation, enough meaning. They don't feel a persistent urge to check, update, or announce. This doesn't mean their lives are small or boring. Often the opposite. It just means their reward system isn't wired toward public reinforcement. Joy doesn't increase when it's witnessed. Sometimes it even decreases. They might forget to take photos at events. They might struggle to explain what they've been up to, not because nothing happened, but because it wasn't organized into highlights. And when they say, "I didn't post it," they genuinely don't understand why that feels strange to others. If this is you, you might notice that being offline isn't an act. It's just your default state. And when people project meaning onto it, assuming you're hiding or protesting, it feels slightly absurd. But here's the twist most people don't expect. Avoiding social media isn't always about withdrawal. Sometimes it's about boundaries. And sometimes it's about power. Choosing when and how you're seen is a form of agency. In a culture that constantly invites you to perform yourself, not participating can be a way of saying, "I exist without needing to prove it." That doesn't make social media bad, and it doesn't make avoidance superior. It just means different nervous systems, values, and identities respond differently to the same environment. Some people flourish with visibility, others with privacy, some with connection through screens, others through presence. And the real psychology isn't about which side you're on, it's about knowing why. Because when you understand your reason, the choice stops being reactive. It becomes intentional. So let me ask you, not as a label, but as a reflection. When you think about social media, what feeling comes up first? Pressure? Relief? Curiosity? Exhaustion? Indifference? Which of these profiles felt uncomfortably familiar, and which one surprised you? If you want, you can sit with that question for a moment, or share it in the comments, in conversation, or just privately with yourself. And if you're someone who watches quietly, listens deeply, and prefers understanding over noise, you're very much in the right place. Stick around.